Hey guys, I hope all is well. I think this is going to be one of the most important videos for the QNT and the XRP community to watch at this time. I know it sounds crazy, okay, it's not just a hook. Please give me just 5-10 minutes of your precious time. I promise you it will be worth it. Over the past 7 years, I've researched QNT over 5,000 hours, probably XRP over maybe 8 to 10,000 hours. I've been researching 5 to 10 hours per day, almost every single day, like a madman for the past 7 years. And there's something I want to explain about the unified ledger, aka the shared ledger, that we are seeing in all of these central bank digital currency documents. Now, Gilbert Vernian, when talking about the regulated liability network, he said we also partnered with R3 that are bringing in the shared ledger where all of the tokenized assets reside. Now, it's very important to note that he says that it's already in a shared state, in a unified state, when R3 brings it over, because he calls it the shared ledger. We're partnered with R3, which are bringing in the shared ledger where all of tokenized assets reside. So it's already in a shared or technically a unified state when R3 brings it over to Quant. I understand this sounds crazy, but I'm going to explain later exactly how and why this ledger is already considered shared and unified without Quant touching it yet. I promise you I'm going to show you the proof. Now, there's a big misconception and misunderstanding in the Quant community and some of the top researchers in the Quant community that it's Quant's technology that causes this ledger to be unified or shared. And I completely understand why they would get to that idea, because for a few reasons. First of all, we are seeing Gilbert Verdian involved in these projects. Quant is certainly involved in these massive projects, and also Quant's ability to interoperate things. So Quant creates interoperability between all of the legacy systems and all of the blockchains that exist. Quant is extremely powerful for interoperability. And so I could understand why the Quant community would have the understanding that it's Quant's technology that unifies this ledger, or technically shares this ledger, or makes this ledger to be in a shared state or in a unified state. Now, the shared ledger is technically a distributed ledger. It's a blockchain. And Gilbert Verdian said that they provided the programmability and the interoperability and custom APIs for this project. For example, the regulated liability network, which was also called the regulated Internet of Value. But what Gilbert Verdian means when he says they're providing the interoperability and programmability, he's talking about the interoperability between all the blockchains and between all of the legacy systems and all of the blockchains. So technically, this ledger is a blockchain. So Gilbert Quant Overledger's role here is to provide the interoperability between this ledger, the shared ledger, and all of the other blockchains and the legacy systems, which are the systems that the central banks and commercial banks and tech companies use today. So Quant allows the shared ledger to connect to all of the blockchains and to all the legacy systems. So Quant is extremely complementary to the shared ledger. And it also allows the banks and central banks to create programmability of money, programmability of tokenized assets, programmability of almost everything. Quant's technology is extremely powerful. Don't get me wrong. And Quant's role is extremely important for this new financial market infrastructure and this new fourth industrial age that we are going into. Now, the shared ledger and the unified ledger are technically the exact same thing, because Gilbert Verdian said that the shared ledger is where all of tokenized assets reside. And then we also see Tony McLaughlin of Citibank, which I'll try to show in a minute. When he talks about the shared ledger, he says it's all the central banks, commercial banks, and all the fintechs merging on this one shared ledger. Tony McLaughlin goes on further and he says technically that is what the regulated liability network is. So he's saying all the central banks, commercial banks, and fintechs connected to one shared ledger. He says this is what the regulated liability network is. So technically, the regulated liability network, the shared ledger, and the unified ledger is all the same thing. The central banks and the planners of this world, these very powerful central bankers, the BIS and so on, they're using these terms interchangeably, if that's a word. They're using these terminologies, these 2 words, 3 words, interchangeably, but it's actually the same thing. Now we see that the shared ledger, unified ledger, is related to the interledger protocol. We can see that it sits on the interledger protocol, or it's related somehow. We see that in all of the diagrams, which I'm going to show right now. Now, right here, you see unified ledger and you see the interledger protocol right here. Sorry, I don't have something clearer to show it there, but unified ledger, I'll zoom it in. Interledger protocol, you see the unified ledger within this framework here, within this box, unified ledger and interledger protocol. This is the Finternet. Unified ledger sits at the heart of the Finternet. Now, the regulated liability network, the first time that it was ever mentioned, it was actually called the regulated Internet of Value. And we've also heard a lot about the Internet of Value. And then now they're using the word Finternet sometimes. Isn't that interesting, right? Finternet, financial internet, Internet of Value. Financial internet, Finternet, Internet of Value. But I can show you in a minute, hopefully I don't forget. We'll see that the first time the Citibank mentioned the regulated liability network, it was actually first called the regulated Internet of Value. Then immediately they stopped using that name. Maybe they didn't want us to figure something out. And I believe one of the other reasons that the quant community doesn't believe that this ledger could be shared or unified, to be considered shared or unified without quant, is because they don't understand the design of the public XRP ledger and the interledger protocol, especially the XRP ledger. And so let me explain to you how the XRP ledger is built, the public ledger. So you have the public XRP ledger here, and this is an open network. And the public ledger, the public XRP ledger, has side chains, numerous side chains. You can build unlimited amount of side chains on the XRP ledger. So these side chains are connected to the XRP public ledger, of course, because they are side chains. There's many other blockchains that have side chains as well. So for those of you who know how a sidechain works, it's the side chains are a carbon copy. They're like a clone of the public XRP ledger. Ripple has a private CBDC platform, which is technically side chains, that the central banks can build their CBDCs on a clone of the XRP ledger. This allows every central bank to tweak their CBDCs however they want to tweak them. You know, it gives them the flexibility to do whatever they want to do for their CBDCs without any other central bank being involved and without any other sovereign nation or other nation telling them how to design their CBDCs. This is a very specialized way so that central banks can build their CBDCs on side chains. And not only central banks, but commercial banks as well. And anybody can technically build on a side chain of the XRP ledger. And so remember that all of the side chains, the CBDCs, commercial tokens, many different side chains, anybody can build a token on the XRP ledger, and they can build it on a private side chain if they want. RippleNet's a private network for sure. And my understanding is technically it's a side chain. And the CBDCs are sitting on side chains too. So they're all sharing this public ledger. Okay? So let me show you a video here of the VP for Central Bank Relations for Ripple. And you're going to understand what I mean here. But before I show that, let me reiterate again that this is why the XRP ledger, the public ledger, is considered to be a shared ledger, an open internet ledger. And this is why the XRP ledger is called the Internet of Value. Ripple has been preaching for the last 10 years, we are building the Internet of Value, Internet of Value, Internet of Value. The XRP ledger is the Internet of Value. Quant is the Internet of Trust. Okay? Gilbert Verdian has never claimed to be the Internet of Value. Gilbert Verdian has always said we are the Internet of Trust. And why does he say that? Because Quant allows everything that exists to connect to blockchain. And so they're interconnecting everything to blockchain, and blockchains represent trust. So that's why Gilbert Verdian says we are the Internet of Trust. Ripple, the XRP ledger, and the Interledger protocol are the Internet of Value. Now, Quant Overledger, providing the interoperability, programmability, and so on, being the Internet of Trust, the fact that it overlays everything, is extremely complementary to the Internet of Value. But the Internet of Trust and the Internet of Value are not the same thing. And the regulated Internet of Value and the shared ledger and the unified ledger are the XRP ledger. But again, the reason that Quant is so complementary, the reason that the Internet of Trust is so complementary to the shared ledger is because it allows everybody in the world to build multi-chain applications. So they're able to also do programmability. They're able to bring unlimited use cases to this world because of Quant Overledger. Actually, before I show you the clip of Ripple, let me just show you the clip of Gilbert Verdian because I had promised that I would show it. It's just going to take 30 seconds here.
Banking grade API. We're also partnering with R3 on the project, which are bringing in the shared ledger where all the tokenized assets will reside.
So now we're going to go right back to the Vice President of Central Bank Engagements for Ripple, where he explains how the CBDC platform, the private CBDC platform, is built on the XRP ledger.
I would love to start off with Ripple's CBDC platform. Tell us about that and how it all works.
The official name is the Ripple CBDC platform. It's really designed to be core infrastructure that a central bank or a commercial bank can use for issuing their digital currencies. The basic underlying technology is based on the XRP ledger. This ledger is a great sort of starting point. It's designed for doing things like CBDCs. We built these other components on top. The primary piece is what we call the issuer. So this is a software that walks the central bank through all those steps, like the creation of minting, the sign-off, approval from the chief cashier to create and so forth. We then have a sort of different component operator, which is not for the people creating currency, but for the people that are. And then the fourth piece of the puzzle is wallets. Wallets for banks, wallets for consumers, wallets that can deal with offline transactions. Those essentially are the four building blocks of the platform. The official name is the Ripple CBDC platform. It's really designed to be core infrastructure that a central bank or a commercial bank can use for issuing their digital currencies. The basic underlying technology is based on the XRP ledger. This ledger is a great sort of starting point. It's designed for doing things like CBDCs. We built these other components on top. The primary piece is what we call the issuer. So this is a software that walks the central bank through all those steps, like the creation of minting, the sign-off, approval from the chief cashier to create and so forth. We then have a sort of different component operator, which is not for the people creating currency, but for the people that are using it. And then the fourth piece of the puzzle is.
So he's telling you it's a private version of the XRP ledger, of the public XRP ledger. These are private versions, exactly what I told you, right? I just told you it's a private version of the public XRP ledger, and it's specialized for central banks to build their CBDCs on it. And he says not only central banks, but commercial banks as well. Okay, so the commercial banks are creating their tokens, they're creating their stable coins. So CBDCs, commercial bank tokens, stable coins are actually being built on side chains of the public XRP ledger, making this ledger to be a shared ledger. And we also see that it's R3 bringing the shared ledger to the project, which Quant said, right? R3 is bringing the shared ledger. And we know that R3 had a big partnership with Ripple many years ago, where they were given 5 billion XRPs. R3 had to bring utility and use cases to the XRP ledger for these 5 billion XRPs that they had received at less than a penny. There was a lawsuit, it was settled. Now R3 still has 1 billion XRP, but now they have to hold their weight because they received 1 billion XRP from Ripple at less than a penny each many years ago. And this is the shared ledger that R3 is bringing to the project. And I'm going to prove this in many other ways in this video. But before I do, I want to just show you on the Ripple website here, just to talk to you about the private ledger, just real quick. Ripple is piloting a private version of the public open source XRP ledger that provides central banks a secure, controlled, and flexible solution for the issuance and management of digital currencies. With over 80% of central banks actively exploring some form. This was written in 2021. So they're saying here, like I said, Ripple is piloting a private version of the public open source XRP ledger. So these are private side chains, and like I explained, right? So these are private side chains. Everybody can build on. People can build different tokens on it. Commercial banks can build stable coins. Central banks can build CBDCs, but they all connect into the XRP ledger, which is the shared ledger, which is the Internet of Value. And this is why they call it the shared ledger, the unified ledger. Gilbert Verdian said they are bringing in over the shared ledger. Now, there is the possibility that you could see XLM, which is a clone of the XRP ledger, XLM and maybe XDC, and a few other platforms. So XLM, XDC primarily, and XRP being interconnected by the Interledger protocol, and it could be technically a unified ledger as well. It would be 3 unified ledgers in one. I'm not going to argue about that, but technically, even if it was those 3 different ledgers interconnected together with the Interledger protocol, because that's what we're seeing on the different BIS documents, I would still say that even in that case, XRP ledger is still going to receive 90% of the volume, because the XRP ledger is the main ledger that all central banks are building their digital currencies, and Ripple is known for the Internet of Value. They're the ones who built the Interledger protocol years ago. They're the ones who have been building the Internet of Value, and they're the ones who are building the XRP ledger. And I know that my friend Greg Quant there was saying that the Interledger, the unified Interledger, is not the Interledger protocol of Ripple. I'm sorry, brother. My brother's mistaken. There's only one Interledger, and it is Ripple that's built it many years. There is no such thing as a Quant Interledger or a second Interledger, anything like that. They can call it the unified Interledger. They can call it the Interledger. Call it what you want. It is the Interledger that Ripple has built. There is no other thing. There's only one Interledger protocol, and it's the one that Ripple has built. And I don't care how many different names the central banks give to it. There's only one. Now, this is a document that was produced by the Hyperledger Foundation. This was coming from the Hyperledger Foundation, which is the biggest consortium of tech companies, central banks, all of the most powerful companies, institutions, universities in the world, all working on open source blockchain. And it's part of the Linux Foundation. This document surfaced about 8, 9 years ago, maybe 7, 8 years ago, and it was called the Internet of Value. You see how the ILP, let me just zoom that in. So you see ILP right here. You see that the ILP is connecting all of the central banks to the XRP ledger. And you see the real-time gross settlement systems here that all of the different central banks use. It's allowing ILPs, allowing everything to connect to the XRP ledger, okay? And here you have central banks and liquidity providers, correspondent banks, CB, and correspondent banks and liquidity providers right here. Also all holding XRP. They're all holding XRP. You see that beautiful little dot there, that beautiful little red token, blue token, XRP, right? So technically, what's happening is, this is a sidechain. So the Bank of Japan, NET, built a CBDC on the XRP ledger. Target 2, which is another central bank, Fedwire for the Federal Reserve. Target 2, I can't remember, I think is that Europe? I can't remember. They're using Fedwire, Federal Reserve, building a CBDC on the XRP ledger. So technically this would be the clones or the side chains, the private CBDC ledgers, for example, that the guy was describing. But either way, you see the interledger protocol here is connected to the XRP ledger and it's allowing everything to connect to the XRP ledger. And you see how the global real-time gross settlement is the XRP ledger. So every central bank has a real-time gross settlement system, RTGS system, and in this document, they're clearly showing that the XRP ledger is the global RTGS. So it's the RTGS for all of the central banks. Isn't that interesting? And right here, you see the interledger protocol will enable financial institutions and central banks to make their existing infrastructure and processes interoperable with other currencies, asset classes, and the XRP ledger. And this document, what it did is it showed how they built the Internet of Information from the Internet of Information. And it was going to the Internet of Value and explaining that Bitcoin was invented, Ripple was born, R3, Interledger Protocol, SBI, Ripple, ILP becomes the standard for connecting Ripple software in 2017, 2020, and it's saying that 2020, 2025, R3 corridor and capital markets emerge, so on and so forth. And then, but I'm going to show you something right here. Again, you see how this is year 2020, 2025. It's saying by the year 2025, every bank, central banks, and commercial banks, these are the central banks, and the correspondent banks, and the liquidity providers, they're all holding XRP, and XRP becomes the global liquidity marketplace for the world. And this is by 2020. Isn't that interesting that the ISO 20022 standards are all launching this year? They're all going to be finalized, and they have to flip over all to ISO. And Ripple is, a lot of people say that there's a few different tokens that are ISO compliant, but Ripple is not only ISO compliant, and not only are they on the steering committee of the ISO 22022. Ripple is actually the only blockchain that is actually on the steering committee of the ISO 20022. They're not only compliant, but they're actually on the steering committee. Isn't that interesting, right? And I also want to explain too that a lot of people don't realize this, but RippleNet itself, the sidechain or software that Ripple built, where all these banks are connecting to, RippleNet is actually compliant for anti-money laundering and KYC as well, which means know your client. Compliance, international compliance regulations or necessities for banks, they've been compliant for that for many, many years. And a lot of people don't realize that RippleNet is actually compliant, like I said, for KYC and for anti-money laundering. And they also have a global rule book that all of the central banks, commercial banks, everybody that connects to RippleNet signs and agrees to this global rule book. So RippleNet is actually globally compliant. So while this Ripple lawsuit was happening, the whole time the Ripple lawsuit was happening, RippleNet was fully compliant. And many, many years ago, they had 300 banks connected in 2018. And then Brad Garlinghouse admitted at the time that they were connecting approximately 6 banks per week, every week. If you did the math, 6 banks per week times 52 weeks, that's 300 banks per year. This is over 6 years ago. 7 times 300, that's 2,100 banks right there, aside from the 300 banks they already had. So right now, easily 2,400 banks connected. This is not counting the other payment systems that are integrating in RippleNet, like CLS and all these other things, especially Swift. Swift is not really a competitor. They always, mainstream media and like Brad Garlinghouse and those guys, they always present it as if it was competition between Swift and Ripple. This is complete BS. They knew that Swift was going to connect into Ripple. It's dinosaur tech. They can't even survive without it. So it was all just a friggin' deception, to be honest with you. I could show you other videos proving that Swift is going to use Ripple already connected. but I don't want to make this video 20 hours. It's just to let you know that even without Swift or any other payment systems that are payment fintechs that are connecting into RippleNet, RippleNet would technically still have like 2,400 banks right now connected into it. Brad Garlinghouse said 7 years ago, because they had 300 connected at the time, and then they were connecting 6 per week since 2018. And so now Ripple still has on their website, they have 300 banks connected. They've never changed that. They said many years ago they were connecting 6 per week, and then they completely became silent on that. They stopped talking about that completely. And then they kept integrating and kept growing and integrating, and they never changed the name on the website. They never changed the amount of banks they had connected on their website. Their profile still says 300 banks. When they talk in the media, they say, oh, we have over 300 banks. It's complete BS. They're all connected, pretty much all connected. So the last thing I want to share with you here is just on the Quant website here, where you see one of their products, simplified tokenization. This is the power of Overledger token flow, letting you create institutional grade tokens that will interact on the chain of your choice now and in the future in minutes and without code. What I want the Quant community to understand here is that when Quant is saying we're tokenizing this and we're doing that and we're doing this and we're doing that, they're doing it using blockchain, right? They're doing it using blockchain. And we've seen that the XRP ledger specializes in tokenization. You can tokenize stuff. You can do any type of token on the XRP ledger. You can do tokenized bonds, stocks, derivatives, CBDC, which is technically a tokenized sovereign currency, right? So the XRP ledger allows you to do that. So Quant Overledger, when we see all of these different products that Quant is building, keep in mind that it's using blockchain to do it. Quant on its own doesn't do anything. The power of Quant is that it connects everybody to blockchain, and people can pick the best features of each chain. They can pick a bit of Bitcoin and Ethereum for smart contract, and maybe they'll use Hyperledger Fabric, whatever. And they can build multi-chain applications. So if you look here, what it reads, it says that create institutional grade tokens that will interact on the chain of your choice. Quant's technology allows these tokens to move to any network. It's interoperability. But Quant doesn't create liquidity. The Quant token doesn't provide liquidity when you need a bridge asset, and that's completely different, right? So anyways, I won't go into that in this video because it's going to be way too long. But I think that's it for now, actually. That's going to be the end of my video. I don't want to make it too long. But long story short is the unified ledger, the shared ledger, is not Quant. It's not Quant. It's the XRP ledger. Okay, it's the XRP ledger that's built on the Interledger protocol. And like I said, I've explained to you in the beginning why I believe that the Quant community is not, a lot of the guys in the Quant community are not understanding how this ledger could be shared, considered shared or unified without Quant's technology, and also they don't understand the design of the XRP ledger. You have to understand that some of us that are coming to Quant have done thousands and thousands of hours of research into XRP, and I'm not saying there's not a lot of guys in the Quant, but the guys that are in the Quant community that don't believe the XRP ledger is still involved, those are the ones that haven't done hundreds or thousands of hours of research into the Interledger protocol and into the XRP ledger. Many years ago, when Gilbert Verding was talking about the Secure Asset Transfer Protocol, the SATP, when they were building it, at the time it was called ODAP, somebody asked him about the Interledger protocol and was it going to go away because of SAP? He says, no, the Interledger protocol has a very specialized use case, is what he said. The Interledger protocol, the XRP ledger is built on the Ledger protocol. The Secure Asset Transfer Protocol is to move assets from one network to another to create interoperability so assets can roam everywhere. But the Secure Asset Transfer Protocol is not for when you want to exchange one asset to a different type of asset. This is completely different. When you want to swap, when you want to trade one asset for a different kind of asset, you need liquidity. If it's not a very big pair, like Bitcoin to Ethereum or like USDT to USDC, if it doesn't have that amount of liquidity, then you need a liquidity. You need a bridge asset for liquidity. I've shown that in another video as well, the head of the BIS, explaining that you do need a bridge asset in a lot of the cases because everything's being tokenized. But anyways, I just wanted to explain. I won't go into that. There's other videos where I explain that. But the Secure Asset Transfer Protocol does not replace the need for the XRP ledger, which is the shared ledger, and it does not replace the need for a bridge asset when there is no liquidity. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please do me a big favor. If you could like the video, if you could share, if you could leave a comment, please tell me if you agree. Tell me whatever, right? But just please leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me also know what kind of videos you would like to see, or any questions you have about the XRP ledger that I'll try to answer. So please like, I appreciate it a lot. I just started this new channel, so if you like and you subscribe and you leave a comment, it really helps the algorithm to get this video out. So please take a second. I really appreciate it very much. Thank you so much, and God bless you all. Thank you.